Coming up, yet another wave of missiles from Russia fall across Ukraine. 70 cruise missiles have been reported so far, leaving people with no electricity or running water, and even affecting Moldova. South Korea's central bank holds a meeting on adjusting the current interest rate, which sits at 3.0%. Many analysts believe the next one will be a smaller raise. We break this down. Plus, South Korea's football team will face Uruguay for the first match of this World Cup. What is the coach Bento saying, and how have the players prepared? We have the details. Good morning. Welcome to New Day at Arirang. We begin this morning as Russia on Wednesday unleashed a large-scale barrage of attacks against Ukraine, disabling the country's energy system amid freezing temperatures in the region. Meanwhile, the EU Parliament has asked member states to support Russia being officially recognized as a state sponsor of terrorism. Our Kim Yo-sun leads us off this morning.
Russia bombarded Ukraine with around 70 cruise missiles on Wednesday, knocking out power and water supply in many parts of the country, as well as in neighboring Moldova. Ukraine's capital Kyiv, as well as the western city of Lviv, were among multiple targets of the latest strike. Authorities say that at least 6 people were killed and over 30 others were wounded nationwide. They added that some 50 of those missiles were shut down.
Then Russia proved it true to the whole world, launching 67 missiles at our infrastructure, at our energy, at regular civilians. The result is tragic. There is a big number of wounded. There are people dead.
The Ukrainian president also highlighted that Moscow should be isolated from international society and held accountable for its latest actions. He also explained that around 10 million people across the country were left without power and heat. To this end, Ukrainian authorities say they have opened up emergency shelters offering food and heating in different parts of the country. The latest strikes appear to be part of the Kremlin's strategy of targeting Ukraine's critical infrastructure to knock out power and other supplies as the country braces for plunging winter temperatures. Meanwhile, as Moscow launched fresh attacks on Ukraine, the European Parliament designated Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism on Wednesday. The latest move is largely symbolic, as the EU currently cannot officially designate states as sponsors of terrorism. However, the Parliament is pushing the regional bloc and its member states to devise a proper legal framework that would allow Russia to be added to such a list. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
South Korea's defense chief on Wednesday urged China to play a constructive role in addressing North Korean threats and encouraged the regime to return to dialogue. The comments were made during talks between Seoul's Defense Minister Lee Jong-sup and Beijing's Wei Pyeong-ho, held on the sidelines of an annual regional security meeting in Cambodia. The two officials were meeting for the first time in 5 months and exchanged views on issues related to the Korean Peninsula, as well as ways to increase cooperation in the defense field. He also asked for China's cooperation in making North realize that there is nothing to gain by advancing nuclear and missile capabilities. In response, Wei said he also does not want heightened tension on the Korean Peninsula, adding that China has been playing an active and constructive role. He stressed greater effort from the two Koreas to resolve this issue. Now, carrying on his latest series of summit diplomacy that began with his tour of Southeast Asia 2 weeks ago, President Yoon sat down with the visiting president of Kenya Wednesday afternoon at the Yongsan presidential office. In Seoul for a 3-day official visit, Kenyan President William Ruto and the Korean leader discussed expanding economic ties and cooperation in ICT, education, pharmaceutical, and infrastructure.
케냐는 동아프리카 진출을 위한 관문이자 물류 중심지로 많은 우리 주요 기업들이 진출해 있는 아프리카 핵심 협력국 중에 하나입니다. 오늘 정상회담을 계기로 양국 간 이러한 교류 협력이 더욱 강화되기를 희망하며 각 분야 협력에 대한 심도 있는 논의가 이루어지기를 기대합니다.
Let me applaud our friendship between South Korea and Kenya. These historical ties are founded on common values and principles, and in pursuit of our shared commitments, Both our countries have continued to nurture and expand the ties with the aim of contributing to the realization of mutual socio-economic development.
This is the first visit by a Kenyan president to South Korea in 32 years. The two nations established diplomatic ties in 1964 upon Kenya's independence. Now, continuing with that, at a business forum, the Kenyan president expressed hopes of facilitating more trade and investment between his country and South Korea. This comes as Africa is set to have more than a quarter of the world's population by 2050. Our Choi Min-jung brings the highlights from that session.
Kenyan President William Ruto portrayed his ambitions to bolster economic ties with South Korea during his three-day visit to Seoul. The president spoke at the Kenya-South Korea Business Forum on Wednesday, which was held to explore trade and investment opportunities between the two countries.
The opportunity that Kenya presents to investors and business people in this part of the world is not just about the investment opportunity in Kenya. It is bigger than that. It is the investment opportunity that you can launch from Kenya into the continent of Africa.
Kenya is the third largest economy in sub-Saharan Africa and serves as a logistics hub and gateway to the continent of Africa. However, the country still sees room for growth in particular sectors including agriculture, ICT, infrastructure, and health. The president of the Korea-Africa Foundation says that South Korean companies have the experience and ability to support Kenya's economic growth in these industries.
South Korea is also ready to cooperate and to grow together by sharing our past experiences that have lots of trials and errors, but finally succeeded.
The forum also highlighted that Kenya's unlimited potential for growth will allow South Korean companies to explore new business opportunities between the two nations. A number of Kenyan cabinet ministers, along with high-level private sector participants, joined Wednesday's event, as well as members of South Korea's business community, including representatives from Samsung C&T Corporation and POSCO International Corporation. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The Bank of Korea on Thursday is set to adjust the country's key interest rate, which currently stands at 3%. The meeting has been convened with an announcement expected at any time. Most analysts are expecting an increase of 25 basis points, taking into consideration inflation and the U.S. FOMC's current stance on rates. An increase would mark the sixth time since April that the central bank has raised the rates, following a hike of 50 basis points in October. Also during the meeting, the BOK will discuss the economic outlook for 2023. The current forecast is 2.1% growth, but this may be adjusted. So without any delay, let's connect with an expert to discuss the upcoming interest rate adjustment. We have Professor Shin Myung-gyu from Yonsei University with us this morning. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning.
The Bank of Korea, according to many analysts, as I've said before, is expected to raise the key rate by a smaller margin of 25 basis points this time. What's the reason behind this change of pace?
The first reason would be that the U.S. inflation rate was lower than the market expectation in October. While the rate was 7.7%, which is still high, it was below the expected rate, 7.9%, implying that the peak of the inflation rate might have already passed. As was mentioned by the Governor Chang Yong-wi in a conference 2 weeks ago, this is good news and less in the short run. Hence, the Fed might take a big step rather than the giant step in the next meeting, giving the BOK room not to raise the rate that much in today's meeting. Secondly, the exchange rate, which is another factor that has pushed the BOK to raise the rate quickly, has fallen during the last month. The value of Korean won relative to US dollar has increased about 6%, which also lowers the incentive of the BOK to raise the rate to prevent further depreciation of Korean won, as a concern for capital outflow might have been lowered.
Right. Now, even if it's a 25 basis point rate hike, still, that would make the current rate be at 3.25%. at a time when many, including those with mortgages, are under increased financial burden. So when do you think we'll begin to see lower rates, and what are some signs that people can look forward to?
Well, I still expect that the BOK would keep up with the Fed by steadily increasing the rate until there is a clear sign that the Fed would stop the contractionary policy and the inflation rates both in Korea and the US are at the range that central banks target. Hence, as the Chairman Powell noted earlier this month, it is very likely that the interest rate will rise until the next year. As I told you earlier, inflation rate is still very high, both in the US and in Korea, which is far beyond the level that we can endure. Since the most important objective of the central bank is to keep price stability, as the governor emphasized about 2 weeks ago, I think the most important sign that we should look at is the inflation rate as usual. If the inflation rate falls for several consecutive months, I guess that will be the sign that the monetary authority would become less hawkish. Another sign that we need to carry is the GDP growth rate. While the inflation rate is the most important variable for the BOK, it cannot ignore the possibility of the upcoming recession. Hence, if the GDP growth rate becomes much worse than market and the BOK expect, that might also affect the stance of the monetary authority.
Right, and I think you put it perfectly. And speaking of the growth, the BOK is also releasing its economic outlook for the country for next year. Growth is currently forecast at 2.1% for 2023, but many analysts believe it will be lower than that. What has changed since the most recent forecast was released?
So the market seems to expect that the BOK, as well as the other institutions like Ministry of Strategy and Finance, will lower their forecast on GDP growth rate, which is a natural consequence of, first, contractionary monetary policy all around the world, and second, supply disruption due to the Ukraine-Russian war. So in terms of the effects of such adjustment forecast on the economy, I think it will not impact that much, as it is already well expected by the market. First, for instance, KDI has already lowered its expected GDP growth rate from 2.3% to 1.8%, and IMF has also cut down its expectation on the growth rate in 2023 from 2.1% to 2%, and they are all the results of steadily high inflation rate, as well as the problem that I just mentioned of the possible long supply disruption. Hence, there might exist a negative signaling effect from the BOK if it really announces lower expected rate on the stock market. But I guess there is not that much effect of the revised outlook on the real economy.
Well, thank you so much for your insights this morning, Professor, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
Now, over in the U.S., Fed officials have largely agreed that the central bank will be able to slow its pace of interest rate increasing soon. Meeting minutes from the rate-setting Federal Open Market Committee released Wednesday show that many officials back a smaller rate hike. Markets widely expect the Fed to step down to a half percentage point increase in December, following 4 straight 0.75 percentage point hikes. Fed Chair Jerome Powell also hinted earlier this month that the central bank may soon begin to slow the pace of hikes. Starting today, the National Assembly will carry out its own investigation into the Itaewon crowd crush. The rival parties agreed on a compromise plan, which will be put up for a vote this afternoon. Our National Assembly correspondent, Lee Kyung-eun, provides a glimpse of what to expect.
Ending weeks of wrangling, the rival parties have agreed on how to go about with a parliamentary probe into the deadly Itaewon crowd crush that resulted in the deaths of 158 people. This comes as the ruling People Power Party made a last-minute decision to take part just one day before the opposition bloc led by the Democratic Party was set to push ahead with passing the plan. But only on the condition that the National Assembly passes the budget first and the revisions are made to the original blueprint proposed by the opposition bloc. Under the finalized plan, national police and fire agencies, Seoul City Government, Yongsan-gu District, and the Ministry of the Interior and Safety will all be investigated. But some organizations associated with the presidential office, including the Presidential Security Service, have been taken out upon the PPP's request.
The DP was arguing that the accident occurred due to the relocation of the presidential office, as riot police were dispatched there rather than in other areas, which he believed does make logical sense.
The other contentious area was the duration. The DP initially called for 60 days, but they've settled on 45 days, which can be extended only upon bipartisan agreement if necessary. The session kicks off right away on Thursday, but the actual investigation will begin next month.
The next few days will be regarded as a pre-investigation used for reviewing documents. Once the next year's budget is passed, we will get started with the audit sessions and on-site inspections.
A special parliamentary committee will oversee the investigation with its first meeting slated for Thursday. The 18-member committee will be headed by the DP and includes members from both blocs. 이경은, Arirang News.
South Korea's first Group H match against Uruguay is set to kick off Thursday night Korea time. Fans of South Korea have been anxiously waiting news on star players Son Heung-min and Hwang Hee-chan's availability to play with both nursing recent injuries. National team head coach Bento hinted at Son's return while doubts remain Hwang's appearance. Shin Se-byuk has this report.
South Korea is set to open their 2022 World Cup campaign against Uruguay on Thursday. Two-time winner Uruguay, ranked 14th in the world and with two previous wins against South Korea at the World Cup, is maybe the favorite against the South Korean side, currently placed 28th on the FIFA rankings. All eyes are on whether the Daegu Warriors will have a compromised team with their star players, with mixed news regarding injuries to captain Son Heung-min and midfielder Hwang Hee-chan. In a press conference on Wednesday, South Korea's national football team head coach Bento hinted at Son's comeback. However, he also confirmed that there are doubts over Hwang's recovery in time for the game, adding a final decision has yet to be made.
Son Heung-min will play. There's still some time before we make the final decision, but Hwang Hee-chan may not be available to play.
After undergoing surgery on an eye socket fracture early in November, Son has been spotted in training wearing a protective face mask. Hwang Hee-chan, however, is still struggling with discomfort in his hamstring. Meanwhile, for Uruguay, Liverpool striker Darwin Núñez is set to appear despite a minor ankle injury. But the game may come too soon for Barcelona defender Ronald Araujo, as he is still recovering from a thigh problem. The Group H match between South Korea and Uruguay will begin at 10 p.m. Korea time on Thursday at the Education City Stadium, Al Rayyan. If South Korea wins, the team will become only the third Asian side to defeat South American opposition at the World Cup after Japan in 2018 and Saudi Arabia earlier this week. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
For a look at the news from around the world, we now turn to our Matthew Ashley standing by at the Arirang newsroom. Good morning.
Good morning, Doyon.
Let's get the latest updates on the Qatar 2022 World Cup, where Japan had a stunning comeback win against four-time World Cup winners Germany.
Well, that is right, Doyon. It was a great start for Japan at the Khalifa International Stadium as they beat Germany by 2-1. Now, Germany had the lead at half-time thanks to a penalty scored by midfielder İlkay Gundogan. But Japan turned things around in the second half. Japan leveled the score in the 75th minute when Ritsu Doan scored off a rebound from Germany's keeper. Then, just 8 minutes later, Japan took the lead with a goal from Takuma Asano. The result is a repeat of history for Germany, who lost to Mexico in their opening match at the previous World Cup. Germany now faces an uphill battle, playing next against Spain. Ahead of the match, the German squad covered their mouths with their hands in a group photo. This in protest over FIFA's restrictions on wearing One Love captains' armbands. Now over at Altamama Stadium, spectators got to witness Spain thrash Costa Rica by 7-0. 6 different players got the goals for the Spanish side, with the first 3 goals coming in the first half. Costa Rica couldn't manage a single attempt on goal and had the ball for very little of the match. The result meant that Spain has won its opening World Cup fixture for the first time in 16 years. Spain also scored its 100th goal in the country's history at the tournament, while 18-year-old midfielder Gavi became the team's youngest ever goalscorer. Now, previous World Cup third-place finisher Belgium got off to a good start in its opening match against Canada, securing a 1-0 victory. Canada, in its first World Cup appearance in 36 years, had a great chance to take the lead in the game with a penalty in the first half, but 22-year-old Alphonso Davies missed from the spot. Belgium then scored the only goal of the game, with Michy Batshuayi scoring just before half-time. Meanwhile, Croatia, who reached the final in 2018, was unable to find the back of the net against Morocco. In a disappointing start to its tournament, the European side was held to a 0-0 draw. Now, taking a quick look at some of the upcoming World Cup fixtures, the next 4 matches see teams in Groups G and H start their World Cup campaigns. Kicking things off is the Group G match between Switzerland and Cameroon at 7 p.m. Thursday, Korea time. Then all eyes in South Korea will be firmly glued to the screen as the country's Taeguk Warriors face off against Uruguay in the Group H opener at 10 p.m. With Cristiano Ronaldo at the head, Portugal then take on Ghana in Group H at 1 a.m. before a return to Group G for the 4 a.m. kickoff, which sees Serbia come up against 5-time World Cup winners Brazil.
Good morning. Cloudy skies to start the day in most regions, and morning temperatures are about 4 degrees lower than the same time yesterday in the capital, while the rest of the country are seeing lows that are 3 to 5 degrees Celsius lower. And mountainous regions in Gangwon-do province are having a sub-zero start, but highs will jump more than 10 degrees Celsius by the afternoon. Some bad news though, the capital region, Chungcheong-do and Jeollabuk-do provinces will have high levels of fine dust all day, and the air quality will get worse as the day goes on. Skies will get brighter as we head towards the afternoon, and highs will be similar to slightly lower than yesterday. Seoul seeing a high of 15 degrees Celsius. Gyeongju, Jeju, Gwangju will be topping out at 17 degrees. Now, light rain is in the forecast in the west of central regions from tomorrow night into Saturday at dawn. Then another band of nationwide rain early next week will bring bone-chilling wintry conditions to the country a week from now. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
And that wraps up today's New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for our Friday's edition at the same time. Please stay with Arirang News though for more updates throughout the day. Have a lovely day or evening wherever you are, and take care.